Everybody, here we are. I'm putting together a video. I have some videos on learning related to the other parts of the chapter. I usually like to cover this material in class, but I figured it'd be best to put a video together. This one might be a little bit longer than some of my others, as I talk about the definition of what learning is, and even get into one of the parts of it better known as classical conditioning. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, as always, I like to define my terms, and this one is really no different. Since we're talking about the learning chapter, the first thing I really want to make note of is what learning is. And as you see there, here's a definition. Feel free to pause it if you need time to write it down. Learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior due to an experience. What does that mean? Let's say I turn around and I'm leaving campus and I have to walk across the road because my vehicle is parked in the parking lot across the street. And on one given day, or maybe day after day, let's say that I get to that road, I get my head down, I'm not thinking about things, I cross the road, go into the parking lot across the street and drive away. But on one day, I've got my head down and I take about 2 steps into the street, and someone turns around and lays on their horn and honks at me and sort of snaps me out of it, and I realize I'm about to get hit. So the person drives away and I go on to my vehicle. But from that day forward, I look before I cross the street. Okay? You can say I've learned something. And that's what I mean. I've changed my behavior. Now I'm looking before I cross the street. Learning is a relatively permanent change in behavior due to something, some experience, some situation, and that's a good way to define it. There are many different types of learning. We're going to discuss a handful of them here throughout the chapter, but this is the one I want to talk about now, and that is what is called learning by reflex, also known as classical conditioning. Classical conditioning, believe it or not, was sort of stumbled upon. It was truly stumbled upon by a man named Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov was never a psychologist. He was a Russian researcher doing what one would call a physiologist or medical research. He was trying to understand salivation in dogs. And what he basically did was this. He actually wanted to see how much saliva a dog would expend based on the amount of food you put in front of it. And in essence, what he tried to do, he put in actual glass tubes in the dog's throat. So basically what would happen as he fed this animal certain amounts of food, he could then see what amount of saliva was produced. And at first, his experiment went very well. I'm going to explain this a little different than the way the book has it, just to make a point. Imagine him going in and petting the dog that's being held in a room in a harness. It's got the glass tubes in place. He pets the dog for a moment, picks up the bowl, and leaves the room. In the next room, he fills it with a certain amount of food. He writes that down. He takes the food into the dog and then basically lets the dog eat, and the saliva ends up in these tubes. He then measures the amount of saliva in the tubes, cleans them out, reinserts them, and goes about his business. For the first 2 or 3 or 4 times, everything works just fine. But after a while, he notices that when he walks into the room to get the what would you say, the food, all right, he noticed the dog is already salivating the moment he picks up the dog dish. The moment he picks up the dog dish, the dog starts to salivate. And it's going to mess up his experiment. Why are you salivating? I haven't brought any food in yet. The dog has been classically conditioned. So what are we talking about here? I want to give you a definition of the 4 components, the 4 major parts of classical conditioning. And my guess is these definitions aren't going to make much sense until I tie them all together. But let me get into them nonetheless, okay? The first one is what is called an unconditioned stimulus. Now, an unconditioned stimulus can be anything. anything that brings about a natural response. An unconditioned stimulus is just that, unconditioned, a natural stimulus. It's unlearned. All right. So, and we use the letters UCS to sometimes explain that. Okay. An unconditioned response, all right, is a natural response, a natural reaction. You have a natural stimulus that causes a natural reaction. All right. And we use the letters UCR to explain that. So basically, an unconditioned stimulus results in an unconditioned response. Okay. Natural stimulus causes a natural response. If I turn around and were to be in class and slam a book down on the table unexpectedly and it makes a loud sound and everyone jumps because they weren't expecting it. The natural stimulus is the loud sound. The jumping is the natural reaction. A conditioned stimulus is anything that can bring about a response. Let me rephrase that. A conditioned stimulus all by itself can do nothing at all. That's what I mean to say. A conditioned stimulus all by itself has the power to do absolutely nothing. It's neutral. You're going to see here in a moment that under the right circumstance, it can do a great deal. But all by itself, it can do nothing at all. And we use the letter CS to describe it. Okay. And the final one is called a conditioned response. A conditioned response is a learned response. It is a learned reaction. Okay. A conditioned stimulus results from the present results in a conditioned response, a learned reaction because of the presence of conditioned stimulus. Now, at this point, I might have you totally confused, and I hope I don't. But take a look at these definitions that I've written down, or that hopefully you've written down that I've given you, and get ready for this next slide, because maybe this will bring it all together. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say that I decide to do an experiment on my dog. Now, my dog during the summertime sleeps out in a doghouse. It likes sleeping out in the doghouse. It's cooler out there than it sometimes can get in the house. So it's very, very happy to be outside. And on one given night, the dog is sleeping outside in the doghouse. And what happens? The porch light gets turned on and the dog wakes up. Why is that light on? That light never comes on. What's that all about? And about 3 seconds later, I turn around and I open the door and out I come with a dog biscuit. And the dog is all happy. It sees me holding that big old milk-bone dog biscuit, and it comes up on the porch because it wants the biscuit. And I turn around and I hand it to the dog. He sniffs it and takes it back to the doghouse and eats away. Okay. And all I do is go back inside and turn the lights off, turn the porch light off, and that's it. Night number 2, the next night. In the middle of the night, the light comes on again. The dog wakes up. What's that light doing on? And sure enough, again, I come out about 3 seconds later with a dog biscuit. And the dog is surprised. My God, another biscuit? Well, sure. Comes up on the porch. I hand it the biscuit. It takes it back to the doghouse to eat it. And I go inside and turn off the porch light. On the 3rd night, and the 4th night, and the 5th night, I do the exact same thing. I turn on the light. I wait about 3 seconds, and I come out with a biscuit. On night 6 and 7 and 8, I turn on the light. I wait 3 seconds, and then I come out with a biscuit. Night number 9. By the 10th night, when I turn around and flip on that porch light, do you think that dog's going to look out from the doghouse and wonder, why is that porch light on? Probably not. Chances are that dog will come running up onto the porch because it has associated that light with getting a biscuit. The dog has been classically conditioned. In this particular example, the unconditioned stimulus is a natural stimulus. And in this situation, the unconditioned stimulus, as far as a dog is concerned, okay, is getting that biscuit. That is the unconditioned stimulus. That is a natural stimulus to a dog. And the natural reaction, as far as the dog is concerned, is that it's all happy. It's a happy dog, a happy salivating dog. That's what it's all about. Okay, a natural stimulus causes a natural reaction. You give me a biscuit, I'll be a happy dog. Okay. A conditioned stimulus is something that all by itself has the power to do nothing. Okay. In this case, the conditioned stimulus is that porch light. And this is where classical conditioning comes all together. When a conditioned stimulus is paired up with an unconditioned stimulus, okay? I say that again. When a light is followed by a biscuit, a light is followed by a biscuit, a light is followed by a biscuit, you get a learned reaction where a light, in this case, makes for a happy dog. The dog has been classically conditioned. When a once neutral stimulus, all right, is paired up with a known stimulus, you create a learned reaction that results. If the light is going to be followed by a biscuit, then the light is going to make for a happy dog. That is an example of classical conditioning. Now let's go back to Pavlov's experiment real quick. As I describe Pavlov's experiment, it's a little bit different from what's written down in the book. The book talks about metronomes and dog powder and all of that. So I'm doing it a little bit differently here. But basically, I describe it as going into the room, picking up the dog dish, taking it to the next room, putting dog food in it, and then coming back and getting the dog to eat. And after a short while, just picking up the dish makes for a happy dog. As I describe it, the unconditioned stimulus would be dog food for Pavlov's dog. The unconditioned response is that you've got yourself a happy dog because it's getting food, a happy salivating dog because it's getting food. All right? Hopefully that makes sense. The conditioned stimulus, that's right, would be the dog dish. Because what you're doing is you're pairing up the conditioned stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus. When a dog dish results in dog food, picking up the dish results in food, picking up the dish results in food, then you get a learned reaction where you get a dog that's really happy because you picked up the dish. This even happens at home, with the dog I have at home. I turn around and if I accidentally kick the dog dish in the kitchen, where she normally eats, if I do that in the middle of the day when I don't plan to do that, just accidentally run my foot into it and kick it across the kitchen floor, well, suddenly the dog shows up. It's associated the sound of that dog dish with getting fed. And though it may be 1 PM on a Saturday, doesn't matter. It's going to come check it out. The dog's been classically conditioned. So let's take this a little bit farther and talk about 2 other concepts known as extinction and spontaneous recovery. Now, in this situation, the 4 variables are still the same. My dog is classically conditioned. I've associated a light with a biscuit so many times that the light makes for a happy dog. Let's start phase 2. Let's say that I turn on the light in the middle of the night and the dog comes running up to the porch. It waits 3 seconds, actually then 5 seconds, then 10 seconds, then 20 seconds, then 30 seconds, and at 45 seconds, I just turn the light off. No food, okay? No food. And the dog probably looks at, what's that all about? And goes back to its doghouse. Night number 2. I turn on the light. The dog comes running up. Wait 3 seconds. Wait 6 seconds. Wait 9 seconds. 20 seconds. 30. 45 seconds. And then the light goes back off. No food. Okay? And I do this night after night after night. I turn on the light. I wait about 45 seconds and I turn off the light and I never come out with a treat anymore. By the 10th night of doing that, and 10 is just a round number, I guarantee you that when I turn on the light, the dog probably will not be running up to the door waiting to get a treat. If the other 9 nights, the light came on and it got nothing. Extinction has occurred. Extinction has occurred. The rule to extinction is this, it's sort of twofold. If a conditioned stimulus and an unconditioned stimulus are no longer paired up, a light no longer results in a biscuit. A light no longer results in a biscuit. A light no longer results in a biscuit. If the conditioned stimulus and unconditioned stimulus are no longer paired up, then a conditioned stimulus will no longer result in a conditioned response. If the light doesn't result in a biscuit, then the light ain't going to make for a happy dog. That's extinction. And we actually use extinction in a number of different ways. We use it in therapy for treating classically conditioned behaviors. We use it in training in other ways as well. Okay? So that's just one example. So let's say that that's extinction. Let's say that after 3 weeks of not even turning on the light anymore, extinction has occurred. And after 3 weeks of turning around and doing nothing, in the middle of the night, I flip on the light for the first time in 3 weeks. And guess what? That silly old dog turns around, sees the light come on, and it goes right back to its old games. It comes running back up on the porch like nothing has ever changed. We call that spontaneous recovery. All right. That is what we call spontaneous recovery. And these are examples, you know, this does happen. People turn around and they forget a behavior. They no longer do a behavior, and something comes along that is that conditioned stimulus in their life, and they go right back to that old behavior like they never missed a beat. That can very much occur. It really, truly can. Two more concepts here worth noting: generalization and discrimination. Once again, the variables are all the same. A light followed by a biscuit results in a happy dog. Okay? You notice that the unconditioned response and the conditioned response, I'm sort of sidetracking here for just a moment. The unconditioned response and the conditioned response look identical. That will not always be the case. In fact, with the unconditioned response, you have a happy dog because it's getting a biscuit. With the conditioned response, in this example, you have a happy dog because a light comes on. Now, granted, the light results in a biscuit, but the dog's getting happy because the light comes on. So there's a little bit of a different reason why it's showing the behavior that it is. The behavior looks identical, but the reasons are different. So let's say we've got this going on. Let's say we are back to the point that the dog is turning around and is classically conditioned. Okay, it is conditioned. I am turning on the light. It comes running up. 3 seconds pass, and sure enough, I do bring out that dog biscuit. The dog has been conditioned. Okay, let's just assume that. And let's say on a given night, I turn around and walk to the side of the house very quietly. I go out the front door, come around the side of the house. I got a big bright flashlight. And instead of turning on the porch light, I shine the flashlight right into the doghouse. Okay. The flashlight is what we call a similar conditioned stimulus. It's not a porch light, it's a flashlight. But if that flashlight, the light gets shined in the dog's eyes and my dog wakes up and runs onto the porch, I'm watching all this from the side of the fence. If a similar conditioned stimulus results in the same conditioned response, that is generalization. Okay, I say that again. If a similar conditioned stimulus results in the same conditioned response, that is generalization. Now, if I turn around and I'm at the side of the fence and I can see the dog sticking its head out in the moonlight and the porch light's not turned on, but I have my flashlight, I shine the flashlight at the dog, and the dog wakes up and realizes that's not the porch light. It's a flashlight. Someone's at the fence. And it comes running over at me, you know, rah, 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 barking at me. A similar conditioned stimulus does not result in a conditioned response. That is called discrimination. So what you have here is generalization and discrimination, as well as extinction and spontaneous recovery in the 4 components of classical conditioning. So there are some examples to explain this. And in my next video here, I'll explain this even farther. But I figured this is a good way to get you started. Good luck.